Okay, good afternoon, girls. For today's lesson, we're going to be learning how to solve word problems using algebra. So, we're going to be taking these problems that are stated to us in words and we're going to create algebraic equations, and then we're going to solve the equations, and the answer to the equations will, generally speaking, be the answer to the problem that we were asked to solve in the first place. So, first thing to note is that some of these problems, for a start, will be quite simple and then they'll get more difficult. Now, even if you can do the problems in your head, that's not the point of the exercise. I still need you to follow through and form an equation each time and then solve the equation instead of trying to do them in your head. Okay, so here's the first one that we come up with. It says, if I add 26 to a certain number, the answer is 37. Find the number. Okay, so with these word problems, there's always something that you're trying to find or find out. And in algebra, the thing that we don't know, or the unknown, or the thing we're trying to find out, we usually give it a name, and that name is one of the letters from the alphabet. It doesn't matter what letter you choose, but traditionally we tend to use an X. Okay, now for these particular problems as well, we will never be using more than one letter. So if we have an x in an equation that we're forming, we won't have a y or an a or a b. We can have more than one x in the equation, but we can't have two different letters like an x and a y. Okay, and the x will represent usually what it is we're trying to find. So if we look at this for a start, the first one, it says if I add 26 to a certain number, the answer is 37. So the thing we're trying to find is a certain number. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is we'll write down what our x is. X is equal to a certain number. And you can use your own language here if you want to say x is some number, a number, whatever it is you'd like to call it yourself. Okay, it says if I add 26 to a certain number. So that's written in words, but if I was to, transform that into maths language or numbers and figures, I would say if I add 26 to a certain number and our certain number is x, so it's like I'm adding 26 to x. And how do I write that in algebra? It's just x plus 26, isn't it? So if I add 26 to a certain number, the answer is 37. So there are often clues in the words of these questions as you go along that tell you how to form an equation. Now, every equation has to have an equal sign or else it's not an equation. Okay, so the equal sign as well is usually represented in words by words like the answer is or the result is. Is a word that you'll be looking for or looking out for quite a lot. It isn't always in every equation or every problem that you'll see it, but in most. So the answer is 37 means that x plus 26 is equal to 37. If I add 26 to a certain number, the answer is it's equal to 37. Okay, so once you have the equation formed, solving it is reasonably straightforward, the same way as we've done them all week. You just do x plus 26. I'm going to put in a minus 26 on this side to get rid of the plus 26. And if I do it to one side, I must do it to the other side. Then these cancel each other out and I'm just left with an x on the left hand side, and 37 take 26 is 11 on this side. So I'm saying x is equal to 11, or I'm saying that my certain number is 11. Now with these you will always test them out to see if they make sense afterwards. If I add 26 to 11, the answer is 37. Well, that's correct, isn't it? So we're sure that our answer is correct. X is equal to 11. That's the first one. Let me just get the second one now. Okay, so the next question is the sum of two consecutive numbers is 47. Find the numbers. Now, just to explain some of the language here, this language that we'll need to know in these particular types of questions, the sum of means when I add two things together. So, like the sum of 1 and 3 is 4. The sum of 10 and 5 is 15. So, it's when I add things together. The product of is when I multiply things together. The difference between is when I subtract one number from another. So that's the type of language that we'll expect to see in these questions. The next thing, I suppose, just for this particular one, consecutive numbers are numbers that come one after the other. So for instance, 5 and 6 are consecutive because 6 comes after 5. 7 and 8 are consecutive. 7 and 9 are not consecutive. They don't come right after one another. There's an 8 in between the two of them. So consecutive, one comes directly after the other. Okay, so let's look at it. The sum of two consecutive numbers is 47. Find the numbers. So straight away we have a difference between the last question and this. We're asked to find two numbers this time. So you'll have two answers. And we have a problem there, don't we? Because we said you can't use two different letters. So for instance, if I use x again to represent one of the numbers that I'm looking for, one of my unknowns, and I call it first number, I can't now say let y equal to the second number, because I'm not allowed in this particular type of, or these particular types of equations we're doing, to use two different letters. So if x is the first number, then I must come up with some kind of an expression here that represents the second number and can only have x's and numbers in it, no other letters. And how we form that is we say, well, x is the first number, and what are consecutive numbers? They're ones that come one after another. In other words, one of them is always one bigger than the other. So for instance, 6 is one bigger than 5. 7 is one bigger than 6. All consecutive numbers, there's always one which is one bigger than the other. So if x is the first one, the second one can be written as x plus 1, because this is 1 bigger than x. So for instance, if x was 5, this would be 5 plus 1, 6. If x was 12, then this would be 12 plus 1, 13. They'd be consecutive. No matter what value x is, these two would be consecutive. Okay, now it's down to forming the equation. So it says the sum of two numbers, two consecutive numbers. These are our two numbers. The sum of means the two of them added together. So x plus 1 is, there's our is again, 47. So is 47 means is equal to 47. And now we have an equation, and now we just have to solve. So just like we would have before, these two we can tidy up first. So all x and x is 2x, isn't it? Now we want to get rid of the plus 1, so we'll put a minus 1 on each side. So that leaves me with a 2x on this side, because the plus 1 minus 1 cancel each other out. 47 minus 1 is 46. And then we know the last step is dividing both sides by 2. So x is equal to 23. Oops, sorry, I'll bring the camera down. 23. Now, the important thing is that our answer? Yes and no. That's the answer to solving the equation, yes. But the question it asked originally was find two numbers. So that's only one number. So what we always do is we go back to our definitions of what x and x plus 1 represent. X is the first number, so we know the first number is 23. We found one of them. Oops. And if the second number is x plus 1, and x is 23, well, 23 plus 1 is 24. So we must always then show our answer, our full answer, I guess, which is 23 and 24, and then test it out also. Are the sum of 23 and 24, is that sum 47? It is. So we're okay there. Okay, last one then. And you know, I'd say before I start on this, I'm going to just break this into a second video in case I run out of time here.